You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Hello?
That's weird. You can feel it.
Hey folks, welcome to a special episode of The Projection Booth. I am your host, Mike White. I am talking today to directors Mark Dennis and Ben Foster about their latest work, which is called Time Trap from 2017. It's currently making its way around the festival circuit, soon to be coming to a downloadable device near you, I imagine. So keep your eye out for that, and when you get a chance, definitely check it out. Until then, listen to this interview. Enjoy.
My name is Ben Foster, and I'm a director on Time Trap alongside Mark Dennis. My dad and I were always playing with the video camera. He would show me new tricks and stuff like that. And just, if you tilt if you set the camera on the ground and tilt it on its side, and then as like a 4-year-old, I remember kind of crawling along the ground. And then when you play it on the TV, because the camera's tilted, it looks like you're going up a mountain. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. That sort of sparked my interest, I think. And then by the time I got to high school, every time there was an option, and sometimes when there wasn't an option, I would always push to do the video project, which was a great, I think, just environment to practice and to be encouraged by classmates in the school and all that. And then by the time I was going to college, I knew what I wanted to do and applied to the UT RTF program, and that's where I graduated and where I met Mark.
My name's Mark Dennis. I'm the writer of Time Trap. Ben and I directed it together. I was interested in films. I mean, everybody kind of went through the same stuff in the 80s and 90s, but I think the big movie for me that got me into filmmaking was Pulp Fiction. My dad got me a script for Pulp Fiction for Christmas one year, and it was the first script I'd ever read, and I realized that you could take something cool like a movie, pull it apart, and just, work on each piece until you pull it together and make something really cool out of it. So I think that was the beginning of just learning how to write.
So Ben, you mentioned this a little bit, but how did you guys meet?
I feel like we crossed paths a few times, but never really met. And then we both ended up in the same class, and we're kind of the odd man out on a project. And Mark was always the guy that would show up with a cool script. And I feel like I had a pretty good eye for shooting stuff and putting a project together. And we just ended up, teamed up on a class project. And that was the beginning of us doing that. We did that short film, and then did a couple other shorts over our college career. And then eventually, during my senior year, we started our first feature, Strings, which took us, several years to finish, but that's something we started in college together.
What was important when we were in college was that, for me at least, I know I was getting paired up with other writer directors, and we would clash a lot in the writing process because we both had kind of like a vision for where the story would go. But whenever Ben and I wound up working on a project together, he was way more into the visuals, and he kind of just let me tell my story because I brought the script in, and we started to learn. He started learning more about story, and I started learning more about visuals because I didn't know anything until I met Ben, and then now I know like 5 more things.
Yeah, that's true. That was I think that probably reduced conflict a lot at the beginning. We found it by the end.
Well, when you guys are directing a movie together, like Strings, how are you divvying up the workload?
Well, Ben usually handles anything related to camera or the look of the film on set. And I focus on any changes in dialogue or dealing with the actors and do the blocking with them and figuring out how the camera's going to line up with what Ben's doing. All of that is figured out usually the night before, or the week before, whenever we're sitting at the table together. Like Ben will draw like a diagram and we'll talk about how I want to block the scene, and we'll stand in for each other. Like, well, what about this camera angle? And then the next day we just kind of remember what we did the night before, or maybe 5 minutes before. But it was just really one brain breaking off into two different mouths to tell people.
And once the project is done, do you both work together in the edit suite, or what are you doing?
This is Mark. Usually what will happen is Ben is still handling the producing side of the film and wrapping things up with the set. And I'll take the footage and do a rough cut based on the performances that I liked on set. And once I've got what I feel is not, I don't feel like you could show it to anybody, but it's how the movie should look overall, then Ben will go through and he'll do like the, tweaking and stuff and turn it into a music video.
Are you guys doing all this stuff in Texas, or by this point have you moved to LA?
Depends on the movie. Strings, we did the whole thing in Texas, which is weird because it's got kind of an East Coast feel. We didn't want Mark showed up with this script where all these people like ride around in trains, and they don't do that in Texas unless you're on the light rail, like in Austin. So, we felt like we had to kind of disguise Austin as some sort of East Coast location. So that movie, we were, aside from me going to New York and Washington, D.C. for like a day each to do some pickup shots, we made that whole movie in Texas. And then Time Trap, the one that we just finished that's doing festival stuff right now, we shot in Austin and in West Texas and did a little bit of things in LA on a soundstage at the old Batcave. And for that movie, we did all of our post in Los Angeles. We'd kind of made the move out there by then.
So Mark, where does the idea for Time Trap come from?
The idea for Time Trap comes from a period when we were trying to get another movie going, and we couldn't get a commitment from an actor. And I think that every time we'd send out an offer, we'd have to wait for a couple of weeks. I'd just go crazy with anxiety, thinking, are they going to say yes? Are we ever going to get this movie made? And I started thinking it'd be cool if I could just go into this closet here and come out, and it would be 2 weeks later. It'd be a fun superpower to have. And then I decided, that'd be cool if it was actually like somewhere interesting, like a cave, because I grew up in Central Texas where there's, a cave every 5 feet. So it kind of started with like a It or Indiana Jones story about a group of kids going into the woods, and then they go into a cave that propels them into the future.
And Ben, when you hear this idea, what are your initial thoughts?
It sounds crazy. It always sounds like a crazy idea when Mark comes to me with a movie idea. But my half of the brain is to figure out how to do it, and that's what we do. And
no, his half of the brain is to tell me how we can't do it, and then figure out how we can, because that's what winds up happening on every single thing. He'll be like, no, this doesn't work because of this. And then I'm like, okay. And I start thinking a second, and I start to like explain the rewrite that I just had in my head. And he's like, well, what if we did this? We could do it the way you said a minute ago. It's like, well, you need to refigure out what the word impossible means.
We always figure it out. It's crazy. But this movie was supposed to be, it was written as a found footage movie at first. And when we showed it to our DP, director of photography, Mike, he was like, you guys should really think about making this, more cinema, like a real movie. It's a cool story, and it deserves to be told like a real movie. So there's still, a found footage kind of element to the movie, and it's a huge story point at its point, and the characters find out a lot about what's happening to them by using the footage that they're filming on their cameras. But it's a cinema film, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you work it in so well. And it wasn't even like, I didn't realize until we were talking that there is this found footage aspect to it, because it does fit the story. And it isn't one of those things where it's just impossible, where you found this camera and there's just all of these weird circumstances that leads you to this. I mean, it is almost literally dropped in their lap, which is a fantastic way of actually providing it.
The found footage having to be a plot device, it felt like luck, because I don't think that if the movie was written, as a normal movie without found footage, I don't think I would have ever gotten the characters to where they were. And that's like the coolest thing about the movie. I feel like it kind of almost like it wrote itself. just like by the way time works.
How crazy are you guys to have a cast that is so many young people, and are they necessarily as young as they kind of play to the camera?
Definitely less crazy now than we were before, because I don't think that we would work with that many people at one time in such an enclosed location. Like we realized that it's just a nightmare having to block 4 or 5 people. A couple of them are, minors. It's a lot of work. So we were pretty crazy to do that.
Are they actually playing? Are they playing their age? But yeah, no, I mean, Olivia was 13, Max was 13 when we started. The older kids are maybe a little bit older than college age. Cassidy turned 21 right before we started shooting, didn't she?
Yeah, they're all about 2 or 3 years in the same direction as their characters.
Yeah, and they're great. I mean, Riley's been doing this his whole life, and he had all kinds of ideas as we were shooting, and he saved us a few times from making some mistakes. Cassidy's been in plenty of movies, Brienne's TV, regular on all kinds of stuff. So their expertise, I think, was hugely valuable to us. And then when it comes to the kids, when you cast kids, you're almost casting the parents as much as you are the kids. And Max's parents and Olivia's parents are both just awesome, and it was huge. It was a huge plus for us to have them there. I don't feel like they're the usual show parents where they're overprotective of the kid or, that kind of thing.
Well, also, especially because so much of the movie was made after principal photography, we did a lot of go and get some more pickups, and we'd go, what if we added this line, or what if we did this shot? And it's easy whenever you've befriended the parents to say, hey, can Max come out and play for a couple of hours, and I'm going to bring my video camera.
That could look bad in another situation.
I'm almost surprised that you guys didn't do like a Boyhood thing and just, keep Max around for a long time, and then just, instead of any sort of like age-related makeup or anything, it's like, now here's the older Max happens to show up.
Well, we almost did. It took us almost 4 years to make the movie, and by the end of it, he's like driving a car and shaving. Luckily, he didn't change too much, but no, they both like started high school and learned to drive and started applying to colleges while we made this movie.
I have to just say that the special effects in the film are fantastic. They enhance the story. They don't take the place of the story, which is really nice. But I am curious how you guys managed to pull off all of these amazing special effects. Is this like a Gareth Ennis thing where you're doing all these things yourself, or how is this working?
Well, there's no actual special effects in the movie. Everything that you see did happen, and we got it as it was happening. Anything that doesn't fall under that was a conglomeration of several different VFX companies. And where were they at, Ben? Bulgaria, Russia, Burbank.
Yeah, Burbank. Yeah. Our whole visual effects process was crazy. There's a lot of things in the movie where you don't even realize it's a visual effect. Like they're in a big cavern. The caves that we shot in were pretty big to begin with, but there's certain shots where we extended the ceiling upwards and things like that. I think it just blended in seamlessly. But no, we found guys. A lot of the movie took longer to finish, I think, largely because of the visual effects, and we were just waiting on, if you don't have money, you have to have time. And we were waiting on these visual effects vendors that were in Bulgaria and Russia. And then there was a guy really up the street from where I lived in LA that helped out on a lot of it. But I would get their files sent over, and then if I needed more shots that were similar, I just kind of reverse engineer and steal their work. It's a big movie for a little budget, for sure. Big ideas.
As you're working on this, are you working on other projects at the same time, or are you solely dedicated to Time Trap for, what did you say, like 4 years?
There's always other stuff going on in our brains. Like you can never turn off, especially like in like just creating, you can't turn off your brain from other ideas. So there's always like other scripts that we're talking about. But usually whenever if we're in development or we're, right there in pre-production, it's just the one project. And when we're shooting, we don't deal with anything else. But as far as post goes, obviously you have to take other jobs. You have to, get away from it for a couple of weeks and work on another script. So I've written a couple of scripts since this movie was done, and we thought we'd be in production on them by now, but it takes a long time to make a movie.
Yeah, and a lot of our next project is going to be determined by what this one does. So the more people that become aware of it, the more people that recommend it after seeing it at a film festival, and the more people that ultimately buy it and rent it and help us kind of make a splash with this film, the higher the level we can execute the next one at. And that's kind of the goal right now. I mean, I feel like we could maybe get something started, but we want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to spend, 5 years on the next movie.
Well, what has been the history of this once you kind of wrapped everything, locked the picture? Is it playing, Fantastic Fest, or where's this going to?
We've had an amazing festival run so far. We've played 6 great festivals. We premiered in Seattle. We played the Austin Film Festival, the Woodstock Film Festival, Mammoth Film Festival. Yeah, Uvalde Film Festival. That was our international premiere that is very mysterious to us. We're not sure if it actually happened, but we hear it did.
We were told that we found out that we got in and then never heard from anybody again. So we're hoping that
we think it happened.
They played the screener at least.
But we're still going. So we have Houston coming up this weekend, followed by the Hill Country Film Festival, which is in Fredericksburg. It's in Central Texas. And then we go up to Bentonville, Arkansas, for the Bentonville Film Festival, which is Gina Davis's fest. And we're excited. We got plenty more life in our festival run, and we're hoping that it'll be available to buy by late summer, early autumn.
I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but...
Wait, no, please do.
Okay, all right. As I'm watching the movie, I was reminded of other time travel movies, of course, and I'm even thinking of other time travel films with younger people in it. And my mind kept going back to Richard Donner's Timeline, based on the Michael Crichton book.
Oh, cool.
And I have to say, Timeline, no offense to anybody listening, but Timeline, not necessarily that good of a movie. Time Trap, way better of a film, and something that I would actually sit down and watch again, maybe even a few times. I really enjoyed the film. And I think that it actually has a better look to it than this mainstream Hollywood film that came out a few years ago.
I'm actually so glad you brought that up. I know you're about to ask a question, but I used to work for Richard Donner whenever I was an intern in college, and the reason Timeline isn't as great as it could be is because the night before they started shooting, this is what I heard from The Office, whoever the company was, the studio that made it, that I'll probably never work for after saying this, they told Paul Walker and Richard Donner that they had to cut their salaries by $10 million if they wanted to make the movie. So they agreed to it. And how many people listen to your podcast? I just realized I'm not said that.
Well, I think that's interesting, though. I mean, that's just what happens in Hollywood. I mean, that's, for whatever reason, they had to reduce the budget, and people get forced to get paid less, or they decide not to make the movie. And I guess as a result of that, maybe he couldn't work as long on the film as he wanted to. Because that's one thing. The biggest lesson of this movie, I think, for me anyway, is that if you feel like it's done, it can still get better. Because the changes that we made in the 11th hour with this movie, our sales agent was like, I have to have a cut that's 10 minutes shorter, and the kids have to get into the cave at the 12-minute mark. And we're like, that's completely impossible.
Yeah, because of that, it wound up being better, because I thought, well, let's just cut this out and change this around, and it wound up somehow playing way better. Like the first 20 minutes are awesome now. Before it was a little bit tedious.
Yeah, and you never know. I always wonder, when I go to a Hollywood movie and it's not good, maybe they just didn't finish.
They have a locked release date that they have to meet, and we've been lucky enough that we can keep working on it if we need to.
You talked about changing the beginning of it and making things tighter that way. And without spoilers, what are some of the other changes that you eventually tweaked out as you were working on this movie and getting it to the place where it is now?
Well, there was a period when Ben was working on an edit, and I was still thinking about the story, and I started to think, okay, let's, people keep saying this would be a cool TV series or a cool movie. What if I wrote a sequel to it? And I think to just keep my mind in it while I was waiting on Ben's new edit, I started to write a sequel to it, and the first 30 pages of the sequel wound up fitting nicely on this movie. So the beginning of this movie, whenever Andrew Wilson is playing Hopper and he's walking through the cave trying to find something, that was actually just written as the beginning of the sequel, but it worked out really well to put it on this one, and it really brought the story around and gave it more depth and paid off some of the motivations that we set up, because we also added a little bit more to the ending too.
Well, it added a lot of setup to the film. I feel like, the way it was before, you meet the kids, we know that this professor is missing, we're not sure exactly where he went, and we go off into the woods to find him. But the way the movie is now, you meet this professor, and you see that he's out in the woods and he's doing something interesting, and you get a glimpse of this cave, where time is essentially frozen inside of. And so you get teased the concept much early. You get into that. It's like Jurassic Park. Like, you get a glimpse of a dinosaur in the first minute of the movie, and then you wait for 20 or 30 minutes, and then you get back into the reason you came to see the film.
The image of the guy who's just standing there at the end of the cave with the lantern is so chilling, and it really does make me say, what is going on here? And I want to know what makes this whole world work.
Yeah,
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was always something that I wasn't sure if it was working or not. And since I know that you don't know us and we didn't really talk to you or anything before you watched it, that you genuinely, you saw that on your own, because that's one of the things on set. You never know if it's going to work. And this is the first time that I've been validated for that.
And,
thank you.
And it looks silly on set. So many things just look ridiculous. And that's our producer, Zach, playing the cowboy. He's a jackass. And to see Zach standing there completely still, holding a lantern and a gun on his hip, or in his handlers. No, it's on his hip. And
no, it's in his hand.
It just seemed, no, it's on his hip. Oh, no, he has two guns. He has one on his hip and one in his hand. And he's holding the lantern. But it just looks so silly on set. And I remember being like, God, I don't know if this is going to work.
What's the feeling like when you see this with an audience for the first time?
So the first few screenings are pretty great, because there's always somebody from the crew in there. And I know that we put them through hell when we were making the movie. So it's nice to see their reaction of oh God, it worked. I didn't know what these guys were doing, but they had a point to all of this chaos. What's sometimes surprising is the age of people who like the movie. There's a lot of people our age and even our parents' age who like the movie, but 13-year-olds is the sweet spot for the audience that's going to be watching this movie in the future, because the 13-year-olds are like, oh my God, my favorite movie is Interstellar, and I loved your movie, and it reminded me of this and this and that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to talk to people after the movie too, because that's, and a lot of times at film festivals, especially, these people don't know us. They showed up because they thought the title and the summary and maybe the trailer was cool, and you find out if you've delivered or not, I guess, after the movie's done. And I feel like we've had a lot of success at these film festivals.
That's the thing, is and this is not an insult by any means, because I love these types of movies, and I'm not trying to paint you with one big brush, but it felt like a really tight YA story. It felt like a really tight young adult book that had been turned into a really tight movie. It was almost like Hannah, where it's like you're sitting there watching it and you're like, I really like this story. This seems like it must be a great book. And then you find out there is no book. This is 100% whole cloth made for the screen.
It's a young audience movie, but it has such an interesting puzzle to it, to figure out how these kids ended up where they are and what's happening to them, that at any age, you at least have that puzzle to kind of follow and put that together as you watch the film.
Yeah, I mean, I am not the typical YA audience, but I was wrapped in this movie, and just that was the thing, was how does this work? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? In that way, it kind of reminded me of a better version of the TV show Lost, where things actually paid off at the end.
Oh, we love that show. That's definitely been a big inspiration for us, even so much so I was ripping off some of the shots for our last movie. But we just love the idea of combining the adventure, the wilderness adventure with time travel, or the science fiction that's not out in space. Yeah, I guess in this case it does go out to space.
They had a season on Lost where maybe they could have skipped.
4th season, I think.
Yeah, I think it was maybe the season before the last one, where they end up. It's just the guy with the eyeshadow, and he's 2,000 years old, and
that's when I stopped watching.
You're just wait a minute. But I was okay with the ending. I liked what they did. It was sort of all they could do also.
Ben, you have a movie on your filmography that I have to ask you about, which is Big Deke 6, Unfuckwithable. That was wonderful.
It's my friend Carl, and I did that with another buddy of mine, Scott. And it was so I worked in casting a little bit when I was in college. I did some interning for a casting director here in Austin, and I worked on the pilot of Friday Night Lights. And then the last thing I did was the very beginning of Grindhouse, the Planet Terror, the Robert Rodriguez film. And by the time that movie came out, they did a competition where if you made the best Grindhouse trailer, they would put it either into the movie or that you got some award or something like that. And so that's what we ended up making for our Grindhouse trailer. I want to make it.
They wound up doing Hobo with a Shotgun, didn't they?
Yeah, Hobo with a Shotgun won. We were in the top 3, but that's what Hobo with a Shotgun is. It's the Grindhouse competition.
Can you imagine Big Deke 6 starring Rutger Hauer? He'd actually be pretty great for it.
He'd be great.
For those of you who are wondering what Big Deke 6 is about, it's about this badass guy from the 70s or 80s who goes to prison for 20 years, and then when he comes out, the world has changed. But it's in a Grindhouse style. And I think the idea that we talked about right before, because we were talking about making it for a little while, but since it was Big Deke 6, while you're watching Big Deke 6, you are going to have these, cutaways to the trailer for Big Deke 1 and the cutaway for, or the trailer for Big Deke 5. And these cutaways are going to show you, more of his backstory but Big Deke 6 is the most important part of his life. The rest of it you could have just seen in the trailers.
And the storyline that I always liked for Big Deke was that he lives in some alternate universe where Prohibition never was repealed. And so he's like a rum runner and coordinates the sale of alcohol in Kansas City or something like that with Canadian whiskey, like tequila and rum from the Caribbean. And that's his world of corruption is, 2018 illegal alcohol.
I feel like we just took over your podcast to pitch a movie that we haven't even talked about this movie in 5 years. And we just pitched it. This is the vision for the movie, and here's some ideas that I have for the character and how I want him to go and take place. And that's exactly what we just did. We took over your podcast to plug a movie we're not going to make.
You never know who's listening, Mark.
Do you already have a poster made up for it? Can you sell this overseas, the foreign rights maybe?
If you're a buyer for movies, you could literally type in right now, you can Apple F or Apple T and then hit Big Deke 6 Unfuckwithable, and you can see the trailer.
You talked about some of the festivals that Time Trap is playing. Is it too early to talk about the distribution, the Netflix rights, all those kind of things?
Only because we just got off of a conference call and we're talked out distribution.
Yeah, that's definitely the topic of discussion, and I will say there's a lot of stuff out there, and it makes it hard to sell a movie. There's just so much competition and so many movies being made, and not just being made, but movies that are good. There's just not a lot of room on the Netflix screen, I guess, to fit them all. It's tough to sell a movie.
We'll be able to show Time Trap pretty soon. In some places you can already see it, but I'm not going to tell you how to find it because I want you to see the ads on Facebook and on your TV.
Just to pull back the curtain a little bit when it comes to the actual Projection Booth podcast, and this is for the listeners and a little bit for you guys as well, I get sent links to screeners and get sent emails and press releases and all this kind of stuff all the time. All the time. Every day I get something in my email box where it's like, hey, take a look at this, and here's this cool thing with this guy, and this is a great concept, and yada, yada, yada. And I would say 95, maybe 98% of the time, I will look at the trailer or even sometimes look at the poster and just be like, yeah, this isn't for me. And I went out and I watched the trailer for Time Trap and I said, wow, this is a real movie. This is actually a real movie. I don't see Caro syrup. I don't see strings. I don't see something that looks like it was shot with, my old VHS recorder. This is a real movie. And then when I actually sat down and watched the movie, I said, my God, this is really a real movie. This isn't just all the best parts were in the trailer. So it was so refreshing to see a real independent film that looks great, that has a tight storyline, because like I said, like you guys just said, there are so many movies being made these days, but not to be harsh, but so many of them are just kind of crappy. And so when you find that diamond in the rough, it's so refreshing to actually be able to latch onto something and say, look at this. This is actually really good stuff.
I'm glad you liked it. So that this comes for us from wanting to make movies that the 12-year-old versions of us would want to watch. I know that whenever I was in middle school, if I saw the poster for this movie or the trailer for it, I'd be excited about it. And I know that as I was watching it, I'd be like, I can relate to this. This is fun. This is like the kind of adventure movie that every kid can relate to. And I think that that's why you liked it so much. It's probably the kid in you being able to go back to that time in your life where everything was still really exciting before Instagram ruined it.
So is there a place for people to keep up with you guys? And when this drops on iTunes or comes to their local theater, plays a film festival, any of those kind of things where they can keep up on the news?
Yeah, just our Facebook is Time Trap the Movie, or Facebook.com/Time Trap the Movie. And I think that's our main thing. You can catch up with me I have a picture on Humanitarians of Tinder right now. That's my selling point. We have a company together called Pad Thai Pictures, but we didn't really think about what that would be like to Google. So when people try to find our company and the other stuff that we've done, all they're going to look at is noodles and peanuts.
Yeah, it's the most impossible to find production company that exists.
But we're not changing it.
Huge mistake. Yeah, no, we'll keep it. We've talked about it. And it's called Pad Thai Pictures because when we were in college, that was, or when we made our first movie, rather, it was we ate pad thai almost like every day because there was this place, Madam Mam's, right next to campus, and the guy that runs it would give us deals on pad thai. So that's what we fed our cast and crew.
He was our pad thai dealer.
I could get behind that. That sounds good.
Yeah, got a dispensary now.
Well, guys, thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been great.
Thanks, man. Hope you don't have to edit too much of it.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.